A man stands at the steering oar of a ship, and on the horizon he can see firelight. Ithaca, home. After 10 years of war, he is close enough to see men on the shore tending their fires. He has piloted the ship himself the whole way, without rest, and now, within sight of home, he falls asleep. While he sleeps, his crew cuts open a leather bag he has guarded the entire voyage. When Odysseus wakes, Ithaca is gone. The stretch of the Odyssey between the Cyclops and the land of the dead looks like a run of unrelated marvels: a bag of winds, a race of cannibal giants, a goddess who turns men into pigs. Each of them turns out to be a variation on a single danger, an offer in one form or another to stop traveling. It begins with the curse. The blinded Cyclops Polyphemus has called on his father Poseidon to see that Odysseus never reaches home, or if fate insists that he come late, broken, and alone, and the curse does not wait. It takes effect almost at once. The first landfall after the Cyclops island is the island of Aeolus, king of the winds. Aeolus receives Odysseus with exemplary xenia, the guest friendship this poem holds sacred, and sends him off with an extraordinary parting gift. He ties up every wind of the world in a bag and hands the bag to Odysseus. Only one wind is left loose, the single breeze needed to blow the fleet straight home to Ithaca. Nothing could be more foolproof. The king of the winds himself has bottled every contrary breeze. The ships should run straight home, and Odysseus tells the Phaeacians they very nearly do. That is how he comes within sight of the fires on his own shore. His crew has watched him guard that bag across the whole passage. They convince themselves it must hold gold or jewels, treasure their captain means to keep for himself. The moment sleep takes him, they open it. Every wind bursts out at once, and the fleet is driven all the way back to Aeolus' island. That small detail about the fires carries real weight. In the first book of the poem, Athena tells Zeus that Odysseus sits gazing out over the water from Calypso's island, longing to see even the smoke rising from his own country. Here, he has come close enough to see exactly that, the fires of Ithaca, the men who tend them, and then being blown back across the sea. It is the cruelest reversal in the wanderings. Aeolus will not help a second time. A man this unlucky, he reasons, must be genuinely hated by the gods, and he will not assist anyone the gods hate. He refuses to let Odysseus land and sends him away. The next landfall is worse. The country of the Laestrygonians is home to a race of cannibal giants, parallels of the Cyclops in their appetite, though each of them has 2 eyes, not one. Here, Odysseus loses 11 of his 12 ships. Until this point, he has commanded a fleet and several hundred men. He leaves the land of the giants with 1 ship and a handful of surviving companions. Between the reversal at Aeolus' island and the slaughter in the country of the giants, the curse of the Cyclops has done its work, immediately and horrifically. What follows is probably the second most famous adventure in the poem, after Polyphemus himself, the meeting with Circe, a goddess, a sorceress with a particular gift for turning men into animals. When the one surviving ship lands on her island, the men have no idea where they are. Whirled about by the winds released from Aeolus' bag, they have lost even their sense of direction. They divide into 2 groups. Half will explore the island. There is a palace inland with smoke rising from it, and half will stay with the ship and wait for a report. They draw lots. The lot to remain behind falls to Odysseus. The exploring party goes out under Eurylochus, his second in command. At the palace, Eurylochus hangs back outside, and Circe turns the rest of the party into pigs. Because he held back, he can run to the shore and tell Odysseus what has happened. Odysseus sets out alone to see whether he can overpower the sorceress and undo her work. On the way, he meets the god Hermes, who gives him a magical plant called moly, proof against Circe's enchantments. At the palace, Circe tries to transform Odysseus exactly as she transformed his men. Nothing happens, and when she discovers that her magic has no effect on this man, she proposes that they go to bed together. The encounter draws out one of the poem's recurring themes, the danger Odysseus faces from seductive women, Circe, Calypso, who holds him for 7 years, even Nausicaa, in her own innocent and very different way. Each presents the same threat, because each offers him the possibility of staying with her permanently. Calypso wants to make him immortal and keep him as her husband. Nausicaa wants him to remain on Scheria and marry her. Circe now offers him a life on her island. Each woman is a threat to his homecoming, and to his reunion with his legitimate wife Penelope. Circe and Calypso, in fact, are doublets of one another, two versions of the same narrative idea. Each is a goddess, each is powerful, each takes a sexual interest in Odysseus and initiates the relationship herself. Yet in other ways, they are exact opposites. Circe begins as a threat. She enchants his man, she tries to enchant him, and only when her magic fails does she become helpful, but then she is genuinely so. She does not try to hold Odysseus one day longer than he wishes to stay. She tells him what he must do in order to leave, and she provisions his ship of her own free will, not under orders from any god. Calypso is the mirror image, helpful first, threatening afterward. When Odysseus washes up on her island, shipwrecked, helpless, utterly alone, she takes him in, feeds him, and effectively saves his life. Then she refuses to let him go. It takes a direct command from the gods to release him. Both, however, threaten the homecoming, and with Circe, the threat is quietly revealing. Odysseus stays on her island quite happily for an entire year, and it is his companions who finally have to remind him that it is time to sail for Ithaca. These episodes also make plain a sexual double standard that runs through the Odyssey and through the Iliad as well. One of the essential questions of the Odyssey is Penelope's fidelity. It is absolutely required that she remain faithful, and whether she has troubles Odysseus, and to some extent the audience throughout the poem. It is equally clear that Odysseus is not expected to remain sexually faithful to Penelope, not during his wanderings and not during the 10 years of the Trojan War. The Iliad shows the Greek soldiers at Troy keeping concubines as a matter of course. Achilles has Briseis, Agamemnon has Chryses. The quarrel over one of these women sets the whole action of the Iliad in motion. It never seems to occur to anyone that a warrior at Troy might remain sexually faithful to his wife at home. Two explanations of this double standard are worth weighing. The first, the Homeric epics assume a masculine viewpoint throughout. Whether the original audience was entirely male or mixed, the poems are told from a male point of view, and the double standard may be a kind of wish fulfillment for a male bard and his male hearers. On this reading, Penelope not only has to stay faithful, she does not appear to mind in the least that Odysseus has not been. At the end of the poem, when he recounts all his adventures to her, Circe and Calypso included, we are told she listens with delight. That reading is possible, but it is probably anachronistic, and something else seems to be at work. The society of both epics is thoroughly patriarchal, and in such societies, with their arranged marriages, marriage exists for one purpose, to perpetuate the legitimate family, to ensure that a man's legitimate male line continues after him. If that is what marriage is for, then female infidelity threatens the entire system. It throws the legitimacy of children into doubt. It undermines the marriage bond, which exists precisely to produce legitimate children. And it endangers a society that cannot function without marriage and children. If a married woman in such a society is unfaithful even once, the paternity of all her children becomes uncertain, and her whole conduct within the marriage becomes suspect. Long before any means existed of testing paternity, a man had no way of knowing that the children in his household were his own. He had to be able to trust that his wife had never, not even once, slept with another man. The consequences are concrete. If Penelope were unfaithful even now during Odysseus' long absence, the legitimacy of Telemachus could be called into question, and with it, whether Odysseus was in fact his father. Odysseus, by contrast, could father any number of illegitimate children around the Mediterranean without casting the slightest doubt on Telemachus's legitimacy. Male sexual fidelity is simply not required by this system of marriage in the way female fidelity is. Within such a society, it's not even accurate to say that Odysseus is unfaithful because no one expected male fidelity in the first place. He has not committed adultery. Adultery, defined from his side, would mean seducing another man's legitimate wife, and that he has not done. The double standard is infuriating to modern readers, and it runs through a great deal of Greek literature beyond these two epics. But within the terms of the society being described, Odysseus has not betrayed Penelope in any sense that either of them would recognize. After a year on Circe's island, prompted by his crew, Odysseus decides to resume the voyage. He asks Circe how he should proceed and where he should go. Her answer changes the shape of the whole poem. Before he can return to Ithaca, she tells him, he must first undertake another journey altogether. He must travel to the land of the dead and consult the soul of Tiresias, the great Theban seer, who will tell him what he must do to reach home safely. A journey to the land of the dead and back is something the greatest Greek heroes have in common. Heracles went down and returned. So did Theseus. So did Orpheus. Later in the great Roman epic, Aeneas, a character patterned in part on Odysseus, will travel to the underworld and come back again. To go down among the dead as a living man, speak with their souls, and return. This marks a hero as belonging to the first rank. The episode is often called the Aeaea, from the Greek word for the dead. Read psychologically, without pressing the psychology too far, it is the death of the warrior Odysseus, the Odysseus of the Iliad, and the rebirth of the Odysseus who belongs to Ithaca. He goes down into the land of the dead, and he comes back out. The episode fills Book 11, and it stands almost exactly at the center of the poem. When Odysseus emerges, he is nearly ready to begin the second half of his homecoming, reclaiming his proper place on the island itself. Within the narrative, the Aeaea does three things at once. First, it gives Odysseus knowledge of home. The audience has known about the suitors and the pressure on Penelope since the opening books, because the narrator has told us. Odysseus wandering the sea does not know. After Book 11, he does. He knows the suitors are threatening Penelope and how much trouble awaits him on Ithaca, because the soul of Tiresias has told him. It is a device that supplies him with news of home, news that would otherwise be very difficult to motivate. Second, the Aeaea lets the audience see one last time the leading figures of the Trojan War, a reprise of the Iliad. Odysseus meets and speaks with Agamemnon, with Ajax, with Achilles. The past is revisited once more, and then the poem pivots from Odysseus' past toward his future, its Ithacan half. Third, consider the audience inside the story. A stranger appears in the Phaeacian palace and stays reticent about his identity for an entire day. When at last he names himself, he turns out to be one of the greatest heroes of the Trojan War, a man everyone has heard of who has been gone 10 years without a word. And then he tells them that he went down to the underworld and came back alive. The dramatic power is enormous. Throughout the wanderings, it is worth remembering that Odysseus is a superb rhetorician, shaping his story for a particular audience, enchanting the Phaeacians so that they will load him with gifts and send him home. Circe also explains the practical problem. How does a living man reach the dead? He is to sail out onto the streams of the river ocean. In this geography, the earth is a flat disk, surrounded on every side by an ever-flowing river of ocean. He must sail out through the pillars of Heracles, the straits we call Gibraltar, and leave the Mediterranean, whose very name means the sea in the middle of the lands, for that unending outer stream. Normally, a ship that sails out of the inner sea into the ocean never returns. Circe tells him to sail out and let the wind carry him to the land of Persephone, queen of the underworld, wife of Hades, its king. Its location is only vaguely indicated. Somewhere on the far side of the river ocean, an entrance to the underworld lies open, and there the ghosts will come up to speak with him. She gives him the ritual as well. When he reaches Persephone's land, he is to dig a pit and sacrifice 2 sheep over it, cutting their throats so that the blood pours in. The ghosts who rise out of the underworld will want to drink that blood before they can speak. Odysseus follows her instructions exactly. He sails through the straits onto the streams of ocean, is carried to Persephone's land, digs the pit, makes the sacrifice, pours the blood, and then the ghosts begin to come. His comrade Elpenor, Tiresias the prophet, his own mother Anticlea, and behind them a long catalogue of the great heroines of the past. The blood runs into the pit, and the dead come up to drink. Every marvel in this stretch of the poem has offered Odysseus a reason to stop. The winds that blew him back from within sight of his own fires. The island where he stayed a happy year, until his companions reminded him what he was for. Now he has sailed past the edge of the known sea to find the one thing that will let him keep going, knowledge of what he must do to reach home, and the ghosts are rising to tell him.